Before we open the file, I need you to understand the fundamental nature of the universe. It hates you.
That is a very bleak way to start a conversation. I thought we were discussing history and gender roles today.
We are, but you cannot understand history until you understand physics, specifically the second law of thermodynamics. The universe has a relentless, crushing preference for disorder. It wants to take the complex, ordered structure of your body and your society and grind it down into a lukewarm, uniform soup. We call that entropy.
Okay, entropy. Disorder increases. I remember that from high school. Things fall apart.
Exactly. Life is a temporary, arrogant rebellion against that law. To stay alive, to maintain a society, requires a massive, continuous injection of energy. We call that discipline. Discipline isn't just about waking up early or following rules. In physics terms, discipline is the energy cost of maintaining low entropy. It is the wall we build to keep the chaos out.
So you are saying that human history isn't a story of moral progress, but just energy management.
It is a story of thermodynamic survival. Every culture, every gender role, every law, they are all just heat engines designed to export entropy. And today, I am going to show you the receipt for that energy bill. It is much higher than you think.
All right, I am ready to see the numbers. Let's look at the data.
Open the file to page 1.
The 96% debt. This visual is intense, a glowing thermal image of a female body and an embryo in the void. It says metabolic load, critical.
This is where the audit begins. For a long time, we thought the cost of reproduction was just the baby, the physical biomass, but that is an accounting error.
The slide says 96% of the energy cost is indirect. It is the metabolic load.
Think about that. Only 4% of the energy a woman spends on reproduction goes into the baby itself. The other 96% is the overhead. It is the massive metabolic tax of gestation and lactation. It increases the basal metabolic rate by 45%.
That is a huge energy spike. It is like running an engine at red line for months.
Exactly. And in the Pleistocene, in the wild, carrying that much metabolic debt makes you incredibly vulnerable. You are burning calories just to exist, which means you have less buffer for starvation or running from predators. From a thermodynamics perspective, a pregnant female is a high-value, high-risk asset walking on a tightrope.
So this debt creates a vulnerability.
It creates a critical thermodynamic instability. If you are carrying 96% of the species' future investment, you cannot afford to fail. You need a subsidy. You need a structure to protect that investment from the entropy of the environment.
And that structure is patriarchy.
That structure is the patriarchal code. It wasn't a moral conspiracy. It was a metabolic bailout. The system needed a way to secure resources for the high-debt core without exposing that core to risk.
That sounds like you are justifying it.
I am explaining the physics of it. The system faced a choice. Leave the high-debt asset exposed to chaos or build a wall around it. They chose the wall.
But walls restrict movement. They restrict freedom.
Walls impose discipline, and discipline reduces entropy. Let's see how that restriction was engineered. Turn to page 2.
The blue pill. On the left, a 1950s sitcom family. On the right, a museum diorama of Man the Hunter. This is the standard story, isn't it? Men hunted because they were strong. Women stayed home because they were weak.
That is the blue pill. It is the comforting fable we tell ourselves to make the structure feel natural. We tell ourselves that biology dictated these roles, that women asterisk couldn't asterisk hunt.
But the data here contradicts that. 79% of foraging societies feature women hunters, and they are ultra-endurance athletes.
This is the red pill. The female body is actually engineered for extreme endurance. Estrogen is fantastic for long-distance metabolic efficiency. Women were perfectly capable of hunting.
So if they could hunt, why did they stop? Why did the man, the hunter myth, become the reality for so much of civilization?
Because of the 96% debt we saw on slide 1. It is not about asterisk capability asterisk. It is about asterisk efficiency asterisk. Imagine you have an asset that costs you millions of calories to build. The reproductive core. Do you send that asset out into the field to wrestle a boar?
No, if it gets damaged, you lose the investment.
Exactly. You don't risk the capital. You risk the expendable income. Men were the expendable income. The restriction on women wasn't because they were weak. It was because they were too valuable to risk.
So the patriarchy was actually a constraint engineered to protect the asset.
It was a thermodynamic constraint. The red pill says it was an engineered constraint. The society that sent its pregnant women to war might have been more equal, but it went extinct because it burned its capital. The society that locked its women in the house survived because it hoarded its energy.
That is a very cold way to look at it. You protect the asset. It turns people into objects.
Thermodynamics treats everything as objects. It doesn't care about your feelings. It cares about your heat output. And to manage that heat, you need a very specific type of engine. Go to page 3.
The thermodynamic engine. This looks like a city from above, but it is glowing like a microchip, and there is a dark structure forming around it.
That structure is a dissipative structure. A society is just a machine that sucks in energy, food, fuel, resources, and spits out waste and disorder.
Entropy.
Yes. Now, here is the hard truth about freedom. Equality is thermodynamically expensive.
What do you mean? How is equality expensive?
Think about a room full of people trying to decide where to go for dinner. If everyone has an equal vote, you have to negotiate. You have to debate. You have to build consensus. That takes time. That takes energy. That generates social friction.
Friction is heat. Heat is entropy.
Exactly. In physics terms, a democracy has a high number of microstates, many possible configurations. That is high entropy. Now, think of an army. One general, one order, zero debate.
Everyone moves instantly.
Low entropy, high efficiency. When the climate drops, or the steppe warriors ride south, you don't have the energy budget for equality. You need to minimize the microstates. You need a hierarchy.
So patriarchy functions as an entropy reduction mechanism. It simplifies society to make it move faster.
It maximizes exergy, useful work. It sacrifices the freedom of the parts to ensure the survival of the whole. It is a heat engine designed to delay decay.
But it delays decay by suppressing people, by crushing them into little boxes.
It cared about not dissolving into chaos. In a crisis, discipline, rigid, unyielding discipline, is the only thing that keeps the structure from collapsing.
But what is the cost of that discipline? We talked about women being restricted. What about the men? They are the ones doing the useful work.
They are the fuel, and fuel is meant to be burned. Let's look at the algorithm on page 4.
Algorithmic expendability. This is horrifying. Millions of silhouettes running off a cliff, and a few bridging the gap with their bodies. Variance. maximized.
This is the software running in the background. We call it the variance protocol. In biology, males are the high-risk bet.
Why?
Because sperm is cheap. You can lose 50% of your males in a war or a hunting accident, and the remaining 50% can still impregnate all the females. The population recovers in one generation.
But if you lose 50% of the females,
The population collapses. The math is brutal. The system optimizes for the failure of the many to secure the success of the few.
expendability ratio, 1,000 to 1. So the system encourages men to take insane risks.
It incentivizes it. The winner-takes-all payoff. If you win, you become the king, the CEO, the patriarch. You get everything. If you lose, you get genetic extinction.
That explains the aggression. The risk-taking, it isn't just testosterone. It is the structure of the game.
It is an algorithm. By turning male aggression into a resource acquisition engine, the system fueled that massive 96% energy deficit we saw earlier. It weaponized male variance to secure the perimeter.
So men are just the perimeter defense, the ablative armor.
We are the immune system. We attack the threats so the core doesn't have to. And sometimes, that immune system is used to destroy other systems.
You mean war?
I mean total system replacement. Turn to page 5.
Total system replacement. A map of Europe. We have green dots being wiped out by a red swarm. Yamnaya expansion, 3000 BCE.
This is the moment the code executed on a continental scale. Before 3000 BCE, Old Europe was different. The Cucuteni Tripilia cultures. They were matrilineal, egalitarian, artistic.
The green dots, they look peaceful.
They were running a low Exergy operating system. They were high entropy in terms of defense, decentralized, cooperative, slow to mobilize violence.
And the red swarm.
The Yamnaya. They came from the steppes. They ran the patriarchal code. Horses, bronze weapons, rigid hierarchy. They were a high discipline, low entropy war machine.
And when they collided,
it wasn't a cultural exchange. It was a deletion. The genetic data shows a near total replacement of male lineages in Europe. The Yamnaya men didn't just conquer. They exterminated the old European men and took the women.
That is genocide.
It is convergent evolution. The universe defines fitness by a single metric: survival. The egalitarian code of old Europe was beautiful, but it was too slow. It couldn't mobilize energy fast enough to stop the Yamnaya machine.
So the meaner system won. The more disciplined, violent system crushed the peaceful one.
Thermodynamics favors the system that can direct the most energy the fastest. The Yamnaya were a focused laser. Old Europe was a diffuse light bulb. The laser burned right through them.
That is a depressing lesson. It sounds like we are doomed to be violent just to survive.
That is what many people think. They think this patriarchy, this violence, is human nature. But there is a glitch in that theory, a ghost in the machine.
A glitch.
Look at page 6.
The ghost in the machine. Chimpanzees versus bonobos. I know this comparison. Chimps are violent and male-dominated. Bonobos are peaceful and female-led.
And they share 98.7% of our DNA. They are our closest relatives. If patriarchy was hard-coded into our biology, bonobos shouldn't exist.
But they do. The slide says they solved the energy debt differently. Female-biased leadership.
They hacked the code. Instead of male protection, they used female coalitions to stop male aggression. They created a social stability that reduced the metabolic cost of violence.
So why didn't we do that? Why are we more like the chimps?
Look at the text overlay. Archaic admixture detected. Ghost DNA.
It says patriarchy is environmental, not just biological.
We aren't chimps, and we aren't bonobos. We are the line that left the jungle and went to the savannah. The jungle is resource-rich. You can afford to be a bonobo. The savannah is harsh, open, and dangerous.
The savannah demanded the chimpanzee war machine.
We traded the bonobo peace for the Yamnaya discipline because the environment threatened to wipe us out. Patriarchy was a software patch we installed to survive a specific level of difficulty.
A choice made by natural selection, not a biological constant. That gives me some hope. It means if the environment changes, we can change the software.
Precisely. And the environment asterisk has asterisk changed. We are no longer on the savannah. We are no longer farming the steppes.
We are in the cloud.
Let's look at the horizon. Page 7.
Obsolete Exergy. The server farm morphing into a neural network. The war for biomass is over.
Think about the physics we have discussed. Patriarchy is a system for maximizing asterisk physical asterisk exergy, muscle power, grain storage, territorial defense. It is great for moving rocks and fighting wars.
But we don't move rocks anymore. We move information.
Exactly. In an information economy, the primary currency is information exergy. Creativity, connection, synthesis.
And the old system, the rigid hierarchy, the suppression of women, that blocks information.
It creates friction. In a network, a rigid hierarchy is a bottleneck. It is high entropy. It wastes the cognitive potential of half the population. The 96% debt is now being amortized by technology and state provisioning. We don't need a warrior caste to protect the village anymore.
So the wall we built, it is now just in the way.
It has become a thermodynamic drag. The structure that once saved us is now suffocating us. It is heating up the system without producing useful work.
The source code that conquered the world is now crashing the system. So, what happens next?
Evolution runs a new update. The slide says, the future is female-coded by thermodynamic necessity.
Because cooperation, networking, and multitasking, the bonobo traits, are more efficient for processing information.
Because they reduce the entropy of the network. The future belongs to the connectors, not the conquerors.
So discipline isn't going away. It is just changing form.
Correct. We are moving from the discipline of the sword to the discipline of the synapse. The universe still hates us. It still wants disorder. But the best way to fight it now isn't with a shield wall. It is with a network.
Adapt or be deleted.
That is the only law that matters.